If you've been around the last couple of years, you may have heard a story or two about this bicycle trip that we took. In 1971, we formed a fellowship of 3 young men, 22 years old. There was Bob. Bob was about my height, a little on the portly side. And there was me, also about my height. Not so portly, but not physically conditioned either, and not strong. Then there was Bloomquist. Bloomquist was over 6 feet tall. He weighed 175 pounds of muscle. He had the aggressive attitude that it took to play linebacker at football at the college level. He could be mean. He could be strange. He was different than Bob and I. We set off from St. Paul, Minnesota, the 3 of us, on our quest to reach the Canadian Rockies later that summer in 1971. We'd been riding together for 5 days at this point. Bloomquist was having some bicycle problems. He had to stop frequently during our rides, waiting for Bob and me to catch up. He also had some mechanical problems with the bike. We had gotten to Black Duck, Minnesota, right there near Red Lake, near Bemidji. And Lee decided he needed to backpedal to Bemidji, 25 miles, to see if he could get his bicycle fixed. He encouraged us to go on. We knew the route we had chosen. And he said, "I'll catch up." And we knew he would. So Bob and I started out following the red path along the south end of Lower Red Lake. Lee went south to Bemidji and then north. What we learned later was that by the time he reached the town of Red Lake right here, he was a half hour behind us. He had ridden 65 miles. We had ridden 35. And his knee went out. He was pedaling with one leg at this point and did not catch us. But he had also not gotten his bicycle fixed in Bemidji. They didn't have facilities for him, so he chose to ride up to Winnipeg to find a bigger Schwinn store where he could get some work done, pedaling with one leg, as Bob and I continued west and north. Well, apparently he did get his bike. Well, let me back up a second. He made it to Bemidji, but how do we know this? We were in communication this time. 1971, we didn't have cell phones. We couldn't text each other. There was no internet to email. But the U.S. Postal Service had something that we used to keep in touch. It's called general delivery. You can write a letter, a postcard to anybody. Send it, care of general delivery, to a specific city. And the post office in that city will hold that piece of mail for about 30 days waiting for it to be claimed. So along this ride out here somewhere, we learned what had happened to Bloomquist, this trip he made to Winnipeg pedaling with one leg. And along the way, from there, bicycling to Saskatoon, Lee coming through Winnipeg, us coming up through North Dakota and across the prairies. And we picked up another postcard from Lee. He was in Saskatoon. We were back here somewhere. He had found a hostel, a privately owned hostel called the Gypsy Mattress. It was run by hippies, Saskatoon hippies, acid heads we might call them. He recommended we stay there, and we did get there. And these people remembered Bloomquist. He was frightening. He was intimidating to them. And we understood what they were talking about. But he was still several days ahead of us. So we stayed overnight. He had stayed a couple of days. They got tired of him. He went on. We stayed overnight in our quest, not just to catch up with Bloomquist, but to get to the Canadian Rockies. As we departed Saskatoon, heading west to ultimately to Jasper, So we went past Edmonton, Alberta, to Jasper, Alberta, the gateway to the north end of the Canadian Rockies National Park. We pedaled several days to get there, and we got to Jasper and went to the post office and found a postcard. Bloomquist had been in Jasper only a few days before. We were encouraged that we were getting close to catching up with him. He had stayed there a couple of days, he recounted in his postcard, and then left a couple days earlier. He also shared the X-rated version of how he kept himself occupied the 2 days he was there waiting for us. So we got on the bicycle the next day. Heading south, we stopped halfway in the Columbia ice fields overnight. That was a full day's ride. We pedaled a half a day from there to Lake Louise, a resort town in the Canadian Rockies that is iconic. We stopped in the post office and picked up a postcard from Bloomquist. He was in Banff at that time, planning to leave the next day. We were a tingle at the prospect of getting together again finally because it was in our reach. We left the post office and we met two young ladies from Eastern Canada who were working at the Chateau Lake Louise, an iconic resort hotel. We bought them lunch. They said, "Why don't you come up to the Chateau? We get off work tonight and we could get together." They were staying in housing up there for the help. So we got on our bicycles, rode up this windy mountain road to see this beautiful blue lake that's been photographed hundreds of thousands of times. And the traditional old resort, we walked through the lobby there and we weighed our prospects. Bloomquist, a half a day away. These two girls are a half a day away. We got on our bicycles and rode back down the mountain and got to Banff, and we were reunited with Bloomquist. It was cheerful. We had achieved our goal of the Canadian Rockies. We had caught up with Bloomquist. We rode together for about 5 days then, heading west, till Bloomquist became aggravated with our slow pace. And he found another reason to continue on a different direction. That was the last he was seen by any of us. Madam Toastmaster.